And good evening and welcome to the Father's Day edition of Kaufman Corner from two dads, myself, Rany Jazayerli, saying happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. We hope you had a great Father's Day. And, in the spirit of Father's Day, we decided to go looking for positives. That's what we thought we would do here. At the end, answer the question is this enough, or is it at least enough to get you by? With us, as always, of course, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals. He's written about the Royals for years. He is the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Rany, happy Father's Day to you, my friend. How are you?
Happy Father's Day to you, Soren. I had a lovely day with the family. My wife and daughters got me an unusual gift this year. Normally, I'm not a big fan of getting gifts of the clothing variety, not something high on my radar, but they really, I think, hit the sweet spot this year. They decided to deck me out in Ted Lasso attire. And for those of you on the video feed, you can see I got the AFC Richmond hat on,
Yes.
the AFC Richmond jersey, my Believe mug right here. They went full Jason Sudeikis for me, which I really appreciate. As a native son of Kansas, my wife and kids don't have any connection to the heartland like I do, so I thought it was a terrific gift. But it really made me think about, in honor of that, putting on a little Ted Lasso positivity for the podcast today. So let's try and zag when everyone expects us to zig, and actually try and find good things to say about the 23 and 42 Kansas City Royals.
Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, there are, as much as, and one of the things I wrote, I think I can't remember if it was on the tweet or in the description of what we were doing today, is that, look, when things are going as poorly as they're going, when the record's as bad as it is, it's easy to go, oh, okay, everything somebody's doing is absolutely wrong, and that's just not the case, right? There are positives that are going on within this organization, and then let's be honest, to do justice to talking about the Kansas City Royals, we should mention those. Like, those need to be pointed out because they're a part of the equation as well, right? It's not all negative just because the record's bad. It is possible to have have positives that are going on within an organization. This one's no different.
No, absolutely. I mean, even a terrible season, there are going to be silver linings. And one of the things that we've talked about that have been frustrating about this season is there's a lot of good things that you can pinpoint that are just sort of being overwhelmed by the big picture, by the two or three really big things the Royals can't do. But I am certainly more optimistic about this team than I think I would be over your garden variety 23 and 42 team at this point. I think there's a lot of things that are pointing in the right direction, and the Royals just have to sort of get out of their own way and let those things happen.
Yeah. All right. So how positive are you? How positive do you want to get with this, Rany? I mean, do you see when we said us, we decided this was going to be the route we were going to go. How easy was it for you to find the positives?
Well, I mean, let's not get crazy now, Soren. But when looking at the big picture is still 23 and 42. But when you're looking for individual players, individual performances that are positive, that are surprising in a good way, there are a number of them. And I think what's key is that a lot of these positive performances involve players who are under club control for a while. These are potentially the kind of developments that can pay off for years to come. Not, I mean, obviously Andrew Benintendi having a good year, well, that's great, but that doesn't really mean much for the long-term future of the franchise. But there are other players we can talk about who I think I feel better about their future today than I did 3 months ago. And their future is going to be in the Kansas City Royals uniform for at least a few years.
Yeah, and I think that is a positive. By the way, if you're catching us via the podcast, we do stream live Sunday nights, 10 p.m. Central. If you are checking us out via YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, you can comment in the comment section right there. We've got a little comment section that you can be a part of the discussion. And, of course, we always appreciate the likes, the loves, the retweets, letting people know about the podcast. It goes a long way for us. Doesn't cost you nothing to put a like or a love next to it. So if you enjoy the podcast, please do that. We would appreciate it a great deal. Let's get to it, Rany. I'll let you go with your first positive. Why don't you lead us off? What's the first positive that you found that should be noted here for the Kansas City Royals?
All right, so I've got. I wrote six positives down. We'll kind of go from least important to most important in the big picture. But the least important one, the first one I'm going to lead off with, is actually, when you take a step back, is very important, which is for all the issues that we've had with the pitching staff. And I'm going to try and get through the entire podcast without mentioning he who must not be named. But for all of the problems that we've had, I believe not a single pitcher on the entire 40-man roster has suffered a significant injury this season. And I mean, that's a big thing when you think about it. Nobody's blown out their elbow. I mean, I think the last major pitcher in this organization to do that was probably Jonathan Bolin last year. And he's actually, I think he took the mound for the first time down in rookie ball a couple of days ago. And, you can talk about the struggles of guys like Kowar, and Bubic has been up and down, even Carlos Hernandez, but nobody's had an elbow injury. Nobody's had a major shoulder injury. The entire 40-man roster, the pitchers are healthy. And the first ability is availability. And these guys are available to pitch. They're the easiest way to stunt a pitcher's development is to keep them off the mound for 3 months or 6 months or a year. And that hasn't happened. And I especially with such a young pitching staff, so many guys who are supposed to be a part of this team for 3 or 4 years in the future, I think that we can't overstate how important it is that these guys are just taking the mound on a regular basis.
Yeah, I agree, and I do think Cal Eldred and the pitching. I've said all along, if it's not
you said his name, you weren't supposed to say it. Okay,
I will say it. You don't have to say it. I'll say it.
All right. Fine.
But whether it's him, whether it's the development people, whether it's the drafting people, somewhere something's broken, unless there's a massive turnaround, right? Like right now, it clearly appears something is broken. But to your point, that is a positive. But when so many of the arms, I'll point out the older arms, Zach Greinke is hurt, right? So from that standpoint, the young guys are supposed to be healthy, right? That's one thing you're supposed to get from young guys is they're supposed to be able to stay healthy.
Yeah, but with pitchers, sometimes it is reversed. The younger guys are at actually higher risk for like major arm injuries. The older guys are more at risk for arm fatigue stuff, which is what Greinke had. Greinke's 38. He's made 2 great rehab starts. I mean, he almost started this weekend. If Zach Greinke being out for 3 weeks is the worst thing that's happened to the pitching staff, let's put it this way: the Royals can't blame injuries for the reason why their pitching staff sucks.
No, they can't. They can't. But I do think that part of it is just the youth of it. And let's be honest, they haven't had much use. Right? Like with a pandemic, having a year off. I mean, how many innings do the guys really have? So they ought to be healthy, but I do think it's an important one. If you can stay healthy, it's an important part of the equation. All right, I'll go with one of, I guess we're going least to most.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go then with on my least, the Hunter Dozier bounce back year.
Okay.
I think if you're going to invest in a guy, you can't have him just fall off a map, which is what he appeared to do last year. The fact that they have got him going in the right direction. He's a serviceable, productive player. The contract is not big. There's very little risk to the Royals unless he really has monster years. And if he has monster years, then he gets paid commensurate to that. So I think the fact that he is bouncing back and is a serviceable player that still has, like you said, he's under control for a while and also is still somewhat near his prime, although he's aging quickly because it took a while. He was a college player that took a while to get here. I think the fact that they stayed the course with the guy and he's hitting, right? Because we've seen the O'Hearns and other individuals that just keep getting lifetime appointments to positions. And was that what was going to be with Hunter Dozier? It's not a fantastic year. It's not the year he had in 2019, but it gives you hope that that kind of season might still be in there. The fact that he's at least productive, solid, and is capable of playing a number of different spots. Seemingly they have positions, guys coming at the same position that he's playing. That isn't the best, but I will say that at least the investment has proven to be a worthwhile investment. And if they get everything else right, I think Hunter Dozier can be part of a championship team, preferably a guy that's, coming off the bench, filling in for guys when they're hurt and part of the equation. I think he's mortar and not bricks, but he's being paid like mortar. And I think that's an important part of the equation, that they at least identified this in-house talent correctly, paid him, have him, and can use him.
Yeah, I have him on my list, kind of lumped in with some of the veterans, with like a Michael Taylor type later on. And I agree with you. Sorry?
I said I'll get to that. Don't worry.
All right. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get there. I think he's a much more positive development. Dozier, I agree. He has bounced back offensively. He's one of the guys where you look at the numbers and you really have to recalibrate your brain for what offense looks like in 2022, because you look at his numbers. Coming in today, 254 batting average, 319 on base, 411 slugging. And your initial reaction is like, that's not really good at all for a hitting position. And yet that's an above average hitter in 2022. And I think it's easy to forget how lost he looked as a prospect at times in the minor leagues. How shocking his 2019 was, when he was, he had 279 with 26 home runs, led the league with 10 triples. Like, that was just completely out of the blue. And then for the last 2 years, he's really been below average, and that looked like a complete fluke. He's sort of settling in somewhere in the middle, which is a serviceable hitter, slightly above average. The issue I have with him, and the reason why I don't have him on his own on this list, is simply, I don't know what this guy is defensively. I don't know if he can contribute anything defensively. Everywhere he's played, his defensive numbers are terrible. First base, he's serviceable, but do the Royals really need a league average hitter at first base, especially when they have so many other options? Now, he's better than Carlos Santana when it comes to that. But when you've got Prado and Pasquantino in the organization, how much value he has there. And I do worry that by the time this team is ready to contend, he is going to be a bench player. That there's just no position where he can contribute offensively and defensively better than the alternatives. But
just to jump in real quick, what I do like is, I don't know, I think he can be part of the championship, part of a championship caliber club by not being on the club, though. By bouncing back and with team control, if he can hit, he has value and he can be traded. And, is he the centerpiece of getting you two great prospects? Of course not. But could he round out a bigger deal? Could he be the Bill Pecota part of a deal that, happened? Where did Bill Pecota go?
That was in the Saberhagen trade.
For
Jeffries and Kevin McReynolds.
Could he weave into the fabric of some kind of deal like that? I think he can. But you can't do that if you can't hit at all. And so to me, I think this is where he again has value in Major League Baseball.
He definitely has reestablished himself as having a value on a roster. Maybe not for the price. I mean, he's only under club control 2 more years, under guaranteed contract for 2 more years. They have an option for 2025, $7.5 million next year, $9.25 million 2024. I mean, it's not cheap, not terribly expensive. He has some value, but what you're describing is having him as like the second player in some sort of large trade the Royals make. I think that sounds great, but you bring up the Saberhagen trade. That presumes that this front office is capable of making that Saberhagen style trade. And they've made exactly 2 such trades in 16 years, one of which, as you've pointed out many times, was forced upon them. They fall in love with their guys, and Dozier was a guy that they identified in the draft. They took 7th overall when nobody had him that high. They played with their draft money so they could get Sean Manaea later in the draft, and having stuck with him this long and having him turn into a viable player, I do worry that even if it makes sense for him to be for his value to be as a trading chit for this team, I'm skeptical they'll do that. But I think he has value on the roster. I wasn't sure that was the case 3 months ago. So yes, I consider that a minor win for this season.
All right. Next up on your list of positives, Rany.
So next up on my list is also kind of a group thing, which is the bullpen guys, and specifically the bullpen guys that the Royals truly are relying on for now and the future. So, you look at the bullpen as a whole, it's definitely been very hit or miss. I mean, Jake Brentz gave up 15 runs in 5 innings, and you've got Colin Snyder, who the Royals seem to like, and started out great, and the wheels completely fell off. He's back in Omaha, but he was never a guy that was going to make or break this bullpen. If his failure doesn't concern me, because I didn't really think he was going to be a part of that great, next great Royals team. But specifically, Scott Barlow, Josh Stomont, and Dylan Coleman, who was the minor league guy who I was very high on. Coleman still walking too many guys, 22 walks in 26 innings, but also 32 strikeouts. He's got a reasonable 3.42 ERA. Stomont and Barlow, again, staying healthy, which for guys in the bullpen where they throw in the upper 90s, there's a huge correlation between your fastball velocity and the risk of elbow injury. Those guys are still healthy. There is the core here of I still think a championship caliber bullpen, whether that is something you try to build around and hope that those guys will still be championship caliber relievers in 2 years, or whether you go into this trading deadline and you put Scott Barlow out there and really see if you can get a significant package for a guy who's proven himself now into his third or fourth year of being an excellent, back of the bullpen reliever who still has club control for, I think, at least 2 more years after this. That would be my move. But either way, the Royals have assets in the bullpen. I don't think they really need to focus on whether in free agency or in trades in trying to get a lot more bullpen guys. I think they have the core there. They need to focus on other parts of the team.
Yeah, I can't help you on that one. I'm not seeing it because the guys you mentioned are all are okay or flawed, right? Like where are some Brewer back of the pen guys? Like who have you said, well, we want one guy to close? Who's your guy that you think can go out there and you just feel totally confident? The combination of productivity with stuff that's going to hold up. Like I don't see it in the I think that's one of the most overrated aspects of the organization. Is
well, here's the issue.
Ability to just create, wave a wand and create a bullpen.
No, I mean, I agree with that. I don't think as an organization-wide concept, every organization should be able to bring, to develop some relievers just out of pure luck, because so many relievers are just failed starters, and if you have enough failed starters, you're going to get them. I think the organization early on in the Dayton Moore era got a lot of credit for that, simply because they inherited what. And I mean this mathematically speaking, like this is not just opinion. Like I have numbers and charts to prove it. What was the worst bullpen in Major League history from 1998 when Jeff Montgomery lost his fastball to 2006 when Dayton Moore took over? The Royals bullpen was it's just anomalously bad. So bad that by accident you'd think they would be better. And I think so when they came in and they drafted Joakim Soria in the Rule 5 draft that first year, and immediately was the best closer the Royals had in a decade, they maybe got more credit for their bullpen manufacturing skills than they deserve. But I don't think the bullpen is an issue. And here's my point, is the issues that they do have in the bullpen. Every one of those guys, with the exception maybe of Barlow, Coleman, Stomont, you could throw in probably Yoel Payamps. You could throw in Amir Garrett for sure. The Achilles heel of all these guys is walks. Yeah. They don't throw strikes. And again, trying to be positive here, I am trying to look at the bright side of having he who must not be named as the pitching coach, and saying, if all the problems that a new pitching coach could be able to fix, the ability to simply throw strikes has to be at the top of that. And I think the raw talent is there. They are surviving in the major leagues. They're succeeding in the major leagues. They're not dominant, but I think that the talent is there. They're still healthy. That gets back to the previous point, that if you bring in a new pitching coach, I think that they could even take a step forward. I mean, if Josh Stillmont cuts his walks by 20%, I think he could be that dominant guy. I still really believe in that guy. You talk about who's going to be that Brewer back of the bullpen, that Josh Hader. I mean, at this point, you almost have to hope that if there's a Josh Hader in this organization, it's Asa Lacy. But that's a different story. Right?
Yeah, that's a very different story. By the way, the name Asa Lacy is not on my list. Having still thrown just 9 2/3 innings this year, he is not on my list of the positives that are going on in the organization right now.
I would agree with that.
All right, I will just say I'll move on, because I don't see it as quite as rosy as you do back there in the bullpen. All right, here's what I'll call it: the ability to identify quality mortar. Okay, that's what and I could have lumped this in with Hunter Dozier, I suppose, but Andrew Benintendi and Michael A. Taylor. One was a trade that really not a lot was given up for. One was a signing and then a re-signing, and both of them have either been as advertised or better, right? And with Gold Gloves last year, Benintendi's been, I know that the slug is way down here of late, but he's still getting on base overall. He's not morphing, but he's just becoming what the back of his baseball card says he is, and which is fine, which is a solid left fielder. Michael A. Taylor, you've noted here several times, about how much better he's played, about, getting the walks up, not striking out, all the things that he's doing to be a better player. The metrics say he's a great defender. I saw him kick one again today, which, then they get the guy at the plate, so it erases the problem. I still don't think he's quite as good as all the numbers say he is, but he's definitely very good out there and is a fly ball catcher and can go get it done. That's important. And right now, I know what people say is like, well, so what? I mean, we need guys who can hit the ball over the wall. Agreed. You need those. There needs to be some Goldschmidts and some, core anchor guys, which really this team, let's be honest, you had one season of Jorge Soler hitting like that, maybe one season and a COVID season of Salvador Perez hitting like that, and one season of Mike Moustakas hitting like that. The rest of the Hosmer Moustakas years weren't even guys that you'd say, boy, that's all-star hitting, right? They got in because Royals fans stuffed the ballot box on guys and got him there, right? But if you can, and again, this is why this is lower, if you can develop the middle of the order guys, the top and middle of the order guys, then finding these guys to finish off a team is an important skill. It's an important part of the equation. And it shows scouting. It shows some horse trading. And they've made Michael A. Taylor better, right? Like he has got, and all credit goes to the player first, but it means you didn't screw it up as a coaching staff or an organization if a guy does get better on your watch. So all those things are part of what goes to completing a championship team. You have to find the core pieces as a small market team within your organization, whether that's by trading for them from pieces of your organization or developing them, but you are going to be able to supplement that by finishing off the roster, getting the full starting nine out there. And I think it is a good sign that if they're not going to develop outfielders, they can at least identify them and bring them in and make them better.
Yeah, I basically agree with that. I mean, Michael Taylor is next on my list. Specifically, I just described it as they have made Michael Taylor a better player. Right. And I think, to me, everything you're describing is you're taking guys who are marginal guys in the major leagues and making them useful contributors, taking useful contributors and making them into everyday guys. I think that's where I would put Michael Taylor in this, where he came in, you could actually argue they took him last year as a free agent that barely played in Washington and been hurt, and was a marginal to even be on a major league roster. And in 2021, turned him into a useful role player, probably stretched to play every day, but a good fourth outfielder. The defense, he was a valuable guy. But this year they took that and they've turned him into a guy who's an everyday outfielder who's got great defensive numbers and a 361 OBP. I mean, that's a valuable commodity. And if you look at pretty much every successful organization in the sport today and ask what do they have in common, it's not that they all have enormous payrolls, right? I mean, the Tampa Bay Rays don't have an enormous payroll, but what they do have all in common is they all have a knack for taking players that came into the organization from somewhere else and made them better, whether it's the Giants, the Dodgers, and actually, if you don't mind, a little segue from our list for a while. I wanted to talk actually about a team that I don't think people appreciate what the reason for their success is, and that's the New York Yankees.
Oh, God. Joe Sheehan got to you, didn't he?
No.
Joe Sheehan got to you, and now you're going to start preaching Yankee love.
I feel dirty even acknowledging it, but look, I started doing my research for today's podcast, and as much as I don't want to look at what the Yankees are doing, I kind of couldn't help but notice that they're 49-16. All right, they lost today, but fine, 49-17, but 49-16, they have a better record and a better run difference. Like, that's not a fluke. That's not just they won a bunch of one-run games. They were Pythagorean win-loss record of 48-17. That's a better record than the 1998 Yankees, right? Which you could argue the best team of our lifetime relative to their league, right? It's only 65 games, but that's crazy. I did not see that coming into the season. I don't know anybody who did. I thought they would be good. I frankly thought the Rays would still be a better team to have a better record. And I had to sit down and see how exactly are they doing this. And it's easy to just see the name in the standings, New York AL, and think, oh, they're just buying their way to another great team. But it really isn't that. I mean, they have they lead the league in offense. Their offense is great, but it's the pitching that's just super elite. But even if you look at the offense, Giancarlo Stanton, they basically bought, right? They traded for him, but the trade was their ability to absorb an enormous contract. So fine, give them Stanton. Anthony Rizzo, they traded for last year, signed him to a 2-year contract. Not an enormous amount of money, but the Royals probably couldn't have afforded an Anthony Rizzo, and he's been very good for them. But I mean, look at the rest of that offense. Aaron Judge, internal development, right? Josh Donaldson, they made a trade with the Twins before the season, and he hasn't been great for them. Gleyber Torres, they got as a minor leaguer in the Aroldis Chapman trade. But you look at like Jose Trevino. Who's Jose Trevino? He was a catcher who came into the season with a career 70 OPS plus with the Rangers. Since joining the Yankees, he got an OPS plus of 128. They made him a better player. But I really don't want to focus on the hitters. I want to look at the pitching staff, because that's really where you can see the importance of coaching. And I'm trying to, without saying he who must not be named's name, I'm trying to emphasize what can happen when you have quality coaching. Everybody knows about Garrett Cole. Yes, they spent they backed up the Brinks truck for Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole has the highest ERA of the 9 pitchers on this team with more than 20 innings pitched. All right, Garrett Cole is not the reason for their success. The reason for their success, Luis Severino, they developed from within. Jordan Montgomery, they developed from within. Nestor Cortez. Do you know what Nestor Cortez has done this year?
Oh, it's incredible.
Incredible. This is a guy, let's just look at his transaction line. He was drafted by the Yankees way back in 2013. The Orioles took him in the Rule 5 draft, returned him in 2018. They traded him to the Mariners for money, or future considerations, which turned into cash considerations in 2019. The Mariners granted him free agency in 2020, at the end of the 2020 season. And then since returning to the Yankees in 162 innings, he has a 2.49 ERA, 42 walks, 178 strikeouts. He's one of the best pitchers in the league this year. A guy who any team in baseball could have had, basically. Like, he's been tossed around. He's been let go by the Orioles and Mariners. That's coaching. All right. Who's the other big success on this team? Jameson Taillon. Now, Jameson Taillon, big name. He was the second pick in the draft.
Right.
But he had the misfortune of being drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates. And if there's one organization, I would say in baseball, at least over the last 10 years or so, that has more egg on their face in the Royals when it comes to not developing pitchers and then having those pitchers develop somewhere else, it's the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I think the exhibit A of this is Garrett Cole, who was the number 1 pick in the draft and was, kind of a league average starter with Pittsburgh for 5 years. They finally traded him for 4 guys in a lopsided deal with the Astros. And overnight, the Astros had him a throw-in, completely changing not his repertoire, but his pitch selection, using his better pitches more and his worst pitches less, completely junking one of his pitches that the Pirates insisted he throw. And his ERA went from 4.26 with the Pirates in 2017 to 2.88 in 2018. And then he led the league with a 2.50 ERA in 2019, and he's been Garrett Cole ever since, right? Jameson Taillon, another guy, the Pirates, with second overall pick out of high school. He had some injuries. Finally got to the majors when he was 24, was an average guy. Then the Yankees traded for him. They traded some decent prospects. Some of those guys that may end up working out for the Pirates. But he joined the Yankees last year, had, developed a little bit compared to his time in Pittsburgh. And then this year, he's got a 2.70 ERA, 9 walks, 60 strikeouts. Like, he's the Jameson Taillon from the catalog that everyone has been waiting for. The Pirates could not figure it out. The Pirates have completely overhauled their front office in the last couple of years, in part because they could not develop players. But the other one, Clay Holmes. I don't know if you've seen Clay Holmes' numbers. Another guy, the Pirates traded him to the Yankees midseason last year. When the Pirates traded him, he had a 5.57 career ERA. Since joining the Yankees, in 60 innings, he has an 0.90 ERA, 36 hits, 7 walks, 67 strikeouts. He's basically prime Dennis Eckersley overnight a guy who had a 5.57 ERA with the Pirates. That's good coaching. That's not money being spent. So good coaching matters. And that's all I want to say about it from the pitching side. The one example the Royals can point to this year is Michael Taylor. Good coaching. He's a better player than he used to be. I hope it continues.
Can I add that you named off a lot of things where the Yankees were transactional?
Exactly.
Right? Like that's the other aspect.
100%.
Yes, they've done a great job, and it is a scary time. I think we had Irish Mac said Rany's Yankees points about good teams drafting, developing is where I get pissed off. Agreed. Because it really is getting to the point, and I like this one from Cameron. He said with the Royals, I feel like Cortez would have an ERA of 7+ and a ton of walks. And all those comments, that's a valid comment. Why wouldn't you? That's been the MO of this team, although I'll give you a reason here in a minute to think maybe that's going to change. But, I think at the essence of it is they made moves, right? Like they don't just sit and hug their guys, right? They identify who is and isn't going to be the guy. They constantly are moving to upgrade. And that's why I will say this, as our positives, I erase, I take back the positive that is the mortar of Benintendi and Michael Taylor. If either one of those guys is still on the Royals roster after the trade deadline, because it shows that they don't see it as we can do this again. It shows that they look at that and go, my God, we got those two right. Whatever we do, we can't give them up. And if they slap a huge contract on a no-homer really hitting Andrew Benintendi and, say, well, we got to have somebody to help these pitchers develop. We got to have a real center fielder. And so we're not going to move Michael A. Taylor. If either one of these guys is still wearing Royals uniforms, to me, it's a sign that they don't believe that they can replicate what they've done. They feel like they've caught lightning in a bottle. And so that's it. Like, we're not moving them. That'll be the scary part for me, and it'll erase what I'm giving them credit for right here.
Well, I hate to say it, but I think you're going to take back what you said, because Benintendi's I'd like to think he'll be traded, but Michael A. Taylor is under contract for next year, and the MO
While we
of
were
this
talking,
team,
MLB Trade Rumors put a story out about guys that are on the or should be on the market, or that would have value and whatnot, and it was on Michael A. Taylor. I mean,
if the article is players who should be on the market, absolutely. But wake me when there's a rumor that the Royals are making him available. That will surprise me.
In the piece, one of the things, I skimmed it real quick. In the piece, one of the things they said was that there are a lot of teams that need center fielders, and there aren't answers in very many places. And so let's hope that means teams are going to come with big offers and are going to buy into. Let's hope that Michael Taylor continues to hit and walk and not strike out, and they believe that he's now the best version of Michael Taylor that there's ever been, and they get him dealt. But yes, I do not think that I will wake up after the trade deadline and say this was a great trade for Michael Taylor. I think I'll wake up and be like, oh, there's Taylor batting 7th. Mm-hmm. I think that's what will happen. All right, so Taylor was kind of that was your next one?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to come back then with you on the fact that MJ Melendez is hitting. This was and the fact that they made the move when he wasn't really hitting in the minors. And so I think MJ Melendez in and of itself, it's mostly just MJ Melendez, but they drafted a guy who can play a premium position. I don't know if he can play it well, which is something that's really frustrating for me, that all we've heard is about how good he is as a defensive catcher. And now when I watch him play, I'm like, well, why didn't they move him to right field 3 years ago? Like, you've got to identify what the guy is. But he's a guy that didn't hit, was hitting last year, wasn't hitting to start the year. They brought him up. The move worked. He's obviously a professional hitter. And I think the ability to identify guys and have talented young players that you can plug in and keep the machine rolling is an important part of it, because injuries happen even when you're contending. And so just kind of the trials and tribulations of MJ Melendez, which are ongoing, I might add, but Melendez is the next most important part of the equation for me.
I must confess to being surprised with this, and the reason I'm surprised is I'm surprised we have him this low. MJ Melendez is number 1 on my list. His hitting development has been, to me, the single most positive development of this season, and I say that with full knowledge that his defense behind the plate has been a much bigger issue than any of us anticipated. Because, yeah, he had mostly good reviews in the minor leagues. I do wonder, at least the low minors, when you're getting scouting reports on a catcher, how much those reports are biased towards simply his ability to throw runners out when they try to steal. And that because he had some very good numbers in that regard in the minor leagues, throwing out 40% plus of runners. I remember last year in Double-A, he was back picking guys. Him and Nick Pratto had some sort of mind meld going on where they could read each other's mind, and he'd throw back to first base, kind of reminiscent of Salvi with Eric Hosmer doing the same thing. And I think that he got a ton of credit for that. But the calling a game, the framing a game, the keeping balls from going to the backstop part of the game, it's not good. And I mean, in basically 22 starts behind the plate, baseballreference.com has him as 9 runs below average. Now, that evaluating catching defense is difficult, more difficult than other positions. And it's a small sample size. But 9 runs below average in 22 games is catastrophically bad, right? So we're at the point where we have to seriously consider if maybe his future isn't behind the plate. But the reason why I still consider him to be the number one positive development is his bat has been so impressive that the Royals might be better off with him playing somewhere else anyway. I mean, as of right now, he leads the team in OPS. If you don't count Edward Olivares in his 15 games, and I'd like to count Olivares because I like him and I'm looking forward to him coming back soon. But other than that, it's MJ Melendez. I mean, today the Royals had 3 hits. He had 2 of them, including a double and a walk, and his OPS is over 800 now. One of my concerns, even as recently as 6 weeks ago, we talked about it, and I said I don't want him playing other positions because it's going to inhibit his development behind the plate. And I still think that's probably true, and I think his defense behind the plate has shown that. But the numbers we're seeing from him right now, that is an everyday right fielder or an everyday left fielder, right? I mean, or maybe third base, but I think at this point, a corner outfield, I mean, he's played the right field, has not completely embarrassed himself. And if you're going to make that move, I mean, the concern I have with catchers moving to a position is if you're going to do it, it's probably better to do it sooner rather than later, simply because the longer they stay behind the plate, the more speed they lose, the harder it is to move to another position. Unless you are a generational speed guy behind the plate like Craig Biggio, where you're stealing 20, 30 bases a season as a catcher, you probably don't have that much speed to lose. And I just looked it up because I was curious. MJ Melendez, according to Baseball Savant, his sprint speed this year, his average sprint speed this year, ranks 65th percentile in the major leagues. So he has above average sprint speed right now as a rookie catcher. He's still young. That's, I'm sure, a big part of it. But still, he's a catcher. Came up as a catcher. He can run. And that kind of sprint speed makes me optimistic that if they decide to move him to the outfield permanently, he can survive and eventually become a decent defender out there.
Well, I love that you said you're surprised he's this low. You have him number 1, and then you basically spent the next 5 minutes discussing all the negatives, right? That's what amazes me.
It's a nuanced opinion, Soren.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't the fact that he still doesn't have a position, isn't that a major issue?
Soren, the Royals are 23 and 42. Beggars can't be choosers. So this is still positive. And I joke, but at the same time, that to me is testament to just how impressed I have been with him offensively. I mean, like I said, okay, great OPS is great. He's got 20 walks and 34 strikeouts. That's phenomenal for a rookie, 23 years old. I'm not sure what position he's going to play, but I am pretty darn sure he is an everyday player in the Royals lineup for as long as he's under contract. Like, he is a good hitter. And he has command of the strike zone.
But again, he's not. This is not the birth of Albert Pujols.
No,
okay.
I mean, But
Well,
the Royals are not
my
the birth
point.
of the mid-odds Cardinals. I mean,
Well, so what is
our
his
standards have to
upside?
be lower.
What is his upside?
I think his upside is, I think he could be, I mean, with his contact rate, I think he could be a 280 hitter with 25 to 30 home runs, which is an above average right fielder.
Agreed.
Or an all-star or an elite catcher. But if that's out the window, I am now confident he could be an above-average hitter at a corner outfield position.
If he can play it, which we don't know, and they're just starting to try to find out, which is why it can't be higher, because it's still an organizational mess.
It is. And I'm a little bit influenced by the fact that the issue of what to do with MJ Melendez has been an issue well before we ever saw him take, a single rep behind the plate. I mean, having Salvador Perez under contract and him, we talked about this on probably our first show before the season even began. What do you do? You could still argue that the best thing the Royals could have done before the season was trade him for an elite outfield prospect or some comparable prospect to a team that actually had a desperate need behind the plate. Because every game he plays behind the plate is a game where Salvador Perez is not catching. And if Salvador Perez is DHing, he's not providing full value. And if he's on the bench, then you've got a $20 million a year player on the bench. And Salvador Perez is not going to the bench. We know that. And the Royals have, a lot of backup catcher prospects in the minor league. They have a lot of catching prospects. None of them are anywhere near the Melendez level, but there are, aside from Cain Gallagher, there are 3 or 4 guys in this organization who I think would be fine serving as a quality backup behind the plate for Salvador Perez. So I'm a little more inclined to consider a position change here simply because of the options that they have.
I'm fine with it, but I can't call it a positive when a guy gets all the way to the big leagues and we don't know where he can play. And the one position you're talking about, which has been blocked by a guy that you've paid, and now he gets here and he doesn't even play that well. I mean, that's it's a more athletic Billy Butler is what we're looking at right now.
That's a low bar. More athletic Billy Butler is like, Billy Butler's right here. Anything up here, yes, I don't know how much more athletic is. So
yes, Don, I see this. I'm hearing the exact same thing you are, Billy Butler. I mean, and listen, Grady's more athletic, but if what he ends up being is a DH, and let's be honest, that's where everyone thinks Pasquantino's going to end up. They're accumulating. That's why. Listen, he's a positive. This was supposed to be a positive. We were doing Father's Day positive, and now you painted me into a corner where I
haven't painted you anything. Look, if Melendez is a DH, then it's not a positive. I agree. I do not think he's Billy Butler. I don't even think he's Hunter Dozier. I think that his athleticism, the fact that he still has some wheels, the arm, obviously, to be a catcher, like there is a skill set here to be a corner out. Billy Butler, may have played left field in the major leagues briefly. Billy Butler was never a left fielder. I would argue he was never a first baseman, even if he played first base.
Did you see Melendez catch the fly balls? I mean, it was like, and I'm demonstrating like the guy settles on it, and then it's like the little league game. Then the guy's reaching clear across his body to get him. He couldn't settle under the ball. That's not a good start. And so listen.
Agreed. I will say when we talk about coaching players to be better, if you had to pick one area in which the Royals have a history or certainly a reputation for making players better, it's outfield defense. Like just get Rusty Kuntz in here for a couple of months to shadow him everywhere he goes. But the bigger point is you're absolutely right. The Royals still haven't decided he is an everyday right fielder or an everyday outfielder, and he's still catching. So I agree. There's a lot of uncertainty here. Yeah. The positive is simply that his bat is, I think, better than I expected, even given what he did in the minor leagues last year. And I'm excited to see what he's able to do at the plate, even as I have no idea where he's going to be on the field.
Well, this will be the last thing I say on the Melendez side of things, but Mike Sweeney came up as a catcher, and they immediately went, "What the hell is this?" And you point about, they inherited in 2006. In 2006, they were spending no money on their draft picks. They were spending no money in Latin America. This organization, that's what is the cause for concern, is that MJ Melendez is no different than Mike Sweeney right now. The difference is it's 16 years later, and you've been given millions of dollars to spend in Latin America, millions of dollars to spend on your draft picks, and we're seeing the same problems that the organization had when they didn't have that, right? When Allard Baird was given $20,000 to spend over 7 years in Latin America, 20 grand over 7 years in Latin America. Like when you spend millions in Latin America, that's supposed to fill in these pieces. And so that's the frustrating part for me and why I can't get much more excited. I mean, I'm excited about the bat talent of Melendez. Yes. And that he's hitting. Absolutely. But big picture, Melendez and where he's at right now is not a huge positive because we still don't know where he's going to play. He's blocked and seemingly where he would fit most naturally. You know, there's just too many stumbling blocks there.
Okay, well, I'm a little confused by the Mike Sweeney comparison because if you're telling me that MJ Melendez turns into Mike Sweeney, that's amazing. I mean, Mike Sweeney was such a good hitter that even moving to first base quickly, he's like a top 20 Royal hitter all time. So
I'm not telling you that because I don't know that it's going to happen, but that is where it's trending towards being the upside. And had they not had to try to just live, sink or swim one shot at every position, which was how the Royals worked back then, or just not nearly enough depth of scouting. I mean, that's one of the things Dayton Moore did, hired tripled the size of the baseball operation immediately because they didn't have the manpower for things. If when you had no manpower, Mike Sweeney could make it all the way to the organization, to the big leagues as a catcher, and it took his first game at Kauffman Stadium for somebody to go, he's not a catcher. How have you spent all these more resources and you're making the same mistakes? And so if he hits, great. Yes, you'll find a spot for him. I coined the phrase about him and Jason Giambi. If the fat kid can hit, put him at first base. Play them both out there every day, see which one hits better, and that's your first baseman. But ideally, I mean, that's damage control. There should be a plan, and it should come together.
Look, I think we're arguing semantics here because we have this conceit of we have to come up with positive things. And I have to put up positive things. Melendez's bat is, let's just say, if I just said my number one is MJ Melendez's offensive performance, is by just ignore the defense entirely. But because what you're saying, I completely agree with, and we've discussed before, that even as well as he's hitting, the frustration here is the Royals seem to have been caught off guard by what to do with him. Even if he was playing great defense, they still would not have a plan for what do you do with Salvador Perez and MJ Melendez. If you believe they're both catchers, you have to figure out how to do them. If you believe that they're not both catchers, then he should have been moved in the minor leagues a long time ago. Certainly, when he started the season in Omaha, he should have been playing the outfield basically every day, as opposed to, I think he had like four appearances in the outfield in the minors before he played there in his first major league appearance. So, yes, I agree. I mean, the way they have handled him is still not a positive in terms of a reflection of the Royals themselves, the way they develop players, the way they have a plan. The comparison to the Allard Baird years is instructive. Yes, I mean, Allard Baird didn't have a plan and didn't have money. These guys have money, not Yankee money, but they have the money to run a functional organization, but they don't appear to have a plan for what to do when you have two players at the same position or whatever it is.
I will always feel obligated, and I will do it again now. It's impossible to really have a plan when you have no money. And I will stand up for Allard Baird and all the guys that ran the organization.
That's fair.
It was impossible. Nobody was going to succeed when you're not even looking at Latin American talent. Not even looking at it. It's impossible.
100%.
All right. So how many more you got?
So if we take Melendez off the list, then let me go to number 2, which is basically just.
So this is your last one?
Well, no, one beyond this.
Okay.
Yeah, we have one. I think we both have the same one. But the one I'm going to hit now is basically the performance of the minor leagues as a whole. And
is it positive?
I would argue that when you don't look at the records of the team. Let's put it this way: the minor leagues are so important. The development of the farm system is so important that even though they're not having the kind of year they had last year, like if you were to rank give grades to farm systems, right? The 2010 Royals, A+, right? Greatest leap forward of any farm system anyone had ever seen. Last year's was probably a good A- when you look at what Melendez and Prado did alone, and Pasquantino developing, and Bobby Witt, which was still kind of a question mark and having, minor league player of the year type numbers. This year, I'd give it a solid B. It's not as good as last year, but Pasquantino came into the season. We were like, this guy could be an average hitter in the major leagues, but he's a first baseman. Even that average hitter, it's not much to write home about. Now it's like, well, this guy could actually be an average to plus for a first baseman. And then you look Michael Massey and Nick Lofton, and some of those high school guys that we've talked about, inconsistent, walking too many guys, but the stuff is as advertised. When I think of so many high school pitchers the Royals have taken whose stuff is immediately backed up in their first full pro season, and that hasn't happened with Mazzucato and especially Kuderna yet. I think as a whole, the minor leagues has been a slight positive compared to coming into the season. And again, beggars can't be choosers. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not saying it's a flaming positive, but just considering how important that is, the minors as a whole versus Hunter Dozier individually, I would rather have guys in the minor leagues, developing than one player in the major leagues having a comeback season.
I feel like we're kind of so beaten down that we get excited when Johnny makes a poo. Like things that, when you're a parent, your child does something, infant child does any little thing and it's this monstrous accomplishment. And it's because you haven't seen your kid, hit a home run in Little League yet, or get an A+ on a test, the stuff that, they will one day go on to do that will really inspire you about your child's future. Just like the 800 OPS, 800. Not 1,000, 800. We're excited. The only guy, Kuderna, none of them are throwing strikes. You mentioned the guys down the low end. Mazzucato is walking the world. Panzini's walking the world. I don't even think Kuderna's walk numbers are those have even tailed off. Isn't it? Kuderna now, and Kuderna, I'm told it is 18 innings, 11 hits, 9 walks, 22 strikeouts is great, but 9 walks in 18 innings. Panzini, where'd he go? He's fallen down. He used to be able to find him because he was up high, but now his numbers have fallen off. So I gotta hunt for him. Well, I know where Mazzucato is. I just scroll pretty much all the way to the bottom. 16 and 2/3, 17 hits, 11 earned, 14 walks, 19 strikeouts. 14 walks, 19 strikeouts. Yeah, strikeouts per inning are up, but they're up for a lot of guys down this low. 14 walks. 14 walks. And where is he? Here he is, Panzini. 15 and a third, 11 hits, 8 runs, 11 walks, 14 strikeouts. 11 walks and 15 and a third. Listen, this is what I said. It was driving me bat crap that they went almost a calendar year before they ever pitched a game. Oh, but they're on the backfields and they're working, and all the scouts, they're raving about it. Whoever was raving about this kind of ability, step into my office. You're fired. Okay? Because at some point, the organization has to value strike zone judgment from hitters and from pitchers. And this isn't it. Asa Lacy wasn't finding the plate, and he's hurt, which I would give you. Pitchers get hurt. But you don't get to keep saying that after you've had Zimmerman. You failed with the number 5 overall pick. Asa Lacy can't go down that road again. I can't help you at all with the minor leagues being a positive. I think it's a.
Well, Soren, you know what they say about me. I'm just irrationally optimistic about this team, always and forever. I think what we've learned from this is that we really should not conduct this thought experiment again anytime soon. Because we're going in looking for positives, and I'm like, well, I've got to rank them. I'm not saying that it's a stellar year, but would you rather me talk about Nicky Lopez's bat? I mean, what exactly is going on this list?
Listen, I disagree. This is one of my favorite broadcasts we've done because we do obviously look at it from different angles, and we're coming at it from different ways, and we set out looking for the positives. And I think it's entirely possible that 3 months from now or a year from now, if we do this, you make it the Father's Day positivity show, right? we may look back and be like, okay, this is where Rany nailed it on this one, this one, and this one. And this is where Petro was completely lost on this one and this one. Rany was lost on this, and Petro got this one and this one right. Like I actually think that this is healthy conversation that I hope is going on at Kauffman. If everybody's looking at their minor leagues and says it's great, like they've lost their mind. If everybody looks at it and is as frustrated as I am, they're in trouble too, right? Because there have to be the guys that are like, no, this is what you're missing. You're missing this and this and this. So I disagree. I think this is as good a conversation as you can have right now because it's different perspectives on it. And I'll add, because that's my next one, goes to what you're saying. The encouraging part is Daniel Lynch in his last 2 starts has thrown 10 1/3 innings. He has struck out 17 and walked 3. Jonathan Heasley in his last 3 starts has 16 strikeouts and 4 walks. Brady Singer on the year, 40 strikeouts and 9 walks. He has a 1.190 whip. He has a sub 1.2 whip. Those are positives. Those are guys that they need to find 2, above average starting pitchers and a lights out bullpen guy. And all 3 of these guys still have the potential to fill that bill. And I think Lynch especially, because I think Singer might be the closer. He might be the lights out bullpen guy. But the fact that they're all now throwing strikes and getting strikeouts versus walks is giant. And I know you don't want to name the guy who's standing watch.
I was going to say clearly what you're saying is the positive is the pitching coach is one of the shining positives of the season.
I can't say
you just ripped me for talking about the minor league.
No, I'm not saying the pitching coach is a positive.
You're right. This is a great segment because we both think the other one's insane right now.
That's right. I am not saying the pitching coach is a positive because what I've said all along is fire him or fire somebody in the minors or fire somebody in your scouting because it's not working. But it is at least starting to work as far as their ability to get swing and misses or get guys to look at strikes, get strikeouts. Strikeouts are important. I don't care what anybody says. Strikeouts are important. And they're getting them with these guys. And it's strikeouts without walks. Strikeouts, if you're walking the world, he's effectively wild. Yeah, see how long that lasts when you get to the big leagues. It doesn't. It didn't work for Randy Johnson. It didn't work for Nolan Ryan early in his career, who had to get sent down before he could do it. It didn't work for Sandy Koufax early in his career. You eventually have to be effective, right? And that's what these guys are starting to be, and I think that's a real positive.
I mean, I would love for that to be the case. I will point out that the Royals are dead last in the American League in strikeouts. They are also dead last in the American League in walks. And I will agree with you to the point where I still believe Daniel Lynch and Brady Singer are a good pitching coach away from being above average starters in the major leagues. And Jonathan Heasley might be there, or he might not be above average, but average, solid number 4 starter. I still think Chris Bubich could be a number 4 too.
Me too.
I mean, if you want to talk about the positive, is that that the pitching talent they drafted in 2018, the talent I still believe in. I think the Royals have squandered it, criminally so, but I think it's still there, and I think there is still time to rescue it. If you want to frame it in that way, I completely agree that is one of the positives. And again, that is why I'm so frustrated with the season. It would be a lot easier if this were the Allard Bear 2005 Royals, and we were sitting here. We wouldn't have much to talk about. It'd be like, yeah, the team sucks. Yeah, this guy sucks. That guy sucks. Okay, we suck. I mean, we suck. Okay, I'll talk to you next week. It's not that. These guys don't suck, but they're being made to suck in too many ways. This was a decent week. The Royals were 500 this week. Probably helped that they played the A's, who are one of only 2 or 3 teams in the major leagues as bad as they are. So, the pitching staff had a good run there. 3 games, I think they gave up like 3 runs in 3 games. They're still dead last in the American League in ERA, but their ERA is under 5 now, 4.97. So, let's throw a parade. But yes, the talent is there. I'll give you that. And I'm really hoping we'll get a chance to see them work with people who can bring the best out of them. Let's just put it that way.
All right. I figure we need to note Chris Thomas says, I'm worried Lynch will end up like Duffy. Without the arm problems, we'll see flashes here and there, but constantly left wanting more. And then This is my favorite from Jeff. Positive Father's Day podcast has been mildly depressing.
But only mildly. So you're welcome.
I love it. Okay, what do you got at number one? Number
I'm
two,
assuming
actually, number two, because Melendez bat was number one.
Oh, right. Melendez bat was number one. Number two is it's Bobby Witt Jr. And the fact that he has held his own in the major leagues, held his own may sound like a backhanded compliment, but it's not. It's a compliment. I mean, again, part of it is that offense is down this year. So you look at his overall numbers at 285 on base percentage, doesn't sound very good at all. 441 slugging, but in 2022, a shortstop who's slugging 441. I mean, his OPS plus is about 104, was 104 coming into today. A shortstop who's an above average hitter and one of the fastest guys in the majors. That's huge. The fact that the Royals have made the decision to move him to shortstop and make him the everyday shortstop. For a while there, they were kind of moving him back and forth between short and third base. I feel like that they've kind of committed to him now. I feel like that, especially without Alberto Mondesi, missing the entire season, Witt has not played at third base since looks like May 24th now. The organization just made a commitment that Bobby Witt is our shortstop for the next 6 years, and he's batting third. Like, they've already decided this guy's going to be our best player. And you think of the last guy they did this to as a rookie being Alex Gordon. Bobby Witt being a league average hitter in late June of his rookie season is a hell of a lot better than where Alex Gordon was at this point in his career. And we're starting to see him take a few more walks. His strikeout rate has been, I think it's exactly 25% as of today, which isn't great, but it was around 25% in the minors. And that was actually the concern, was if you wanted to ding him for anything in the minor leagues, was his strikeout rate going to escalate out of control in the majors. He has kept it at the same level despite moving to the major leagues. He just turned 22 the other day. And if you just double his numbers, all right, so he's played in 63 games. So you just double it, 126 games. It's not a full season. If you doubled his numbers, he'd have 30 doubles, 8 triples, and 16 home runs. Like, quietly, he's had a ton of extra base hits. They're not all home runs yet, but give me a 21, 22-year-old who's hitting a lot of doubles and triples and can elevate the ball, and I'll show you a 24-year-old who's hitting 30 or 40 home runs a season.
160 minor league games. That's all the guy had. He had the alternate site or whatever was going on during the COVID year where they had him over there. 661 at-bats in his minor league career before this year. They took him number 2 overall. And while he hasn't come out of the gates like a rocket, with that little experience to play and play well, I think is important. They can't miss at pick number 2. They're going to have a high pick next year as well. And I've said all along, and listen, Bobby Witt Jr. alone may not be enough at the end of the year for me to say, yeah, Dayton Moore and his crew should make this pick, right? It might not be enough on its own.
Sure.
But he is done, like you said, put up good numbers. And if he has a hot second half, could end up being one of those guys like we're talking about, where you say, okay, that is, Pujols-y. Pujols, in fair, you're talking about one of the, handful of greatest hitters of all time. But you could be looking at like, okay, this is a legitimate budding star who still has superstar ability. You see all the athleticism. You see him play the position. I think the key is going to be for them to let him settle in wherever it's going to be and get going. I don't know. Maybe that's not where baseball's going. Everybody's going to have 2 positions that they play, but the hit tool, I think he still swings too much at some things, but I think that can come around. But he's delivering on the promise. He hasn't exploded, but there's still a lot of baseball left, and he's still really young. It is based upon his inning, based upon his games played. He's still really young, which means that there's a lot of ceiling left there. And yes, that's without a doubt the biggest positive, because we have seen number 2 picks, number 3 picks come up for this franchise. Number 1 picks come up and suck, flat out suck, and have to go back to the minors and eventually get it together. Moustakas, Hosmer, Gordon. But we have seen just anguish, painful. Fans having to turn on the players, which is such a toxic environment and certainly doesn't help the development of anybody. We have seen that happen, and that's not happening here with Bobby Witt Jr. And that is without a doubt the single biggest positive going on with the franchise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you just look, I was just breaking it down. You take out the first 28 games of his career. He started off very slow, just like he did in Double-A last year, and since May 13th,
39. If you take that away, the numbers look a lot better.
I could even go back even farther, and then you have a larger sample size. If you take out just his first 10 games, where he was, I think, 5 for 39, like you said, hitting 266, 310 on base, 482 slugging. Since May 13th, I was looking. It's actually. I'm surprised that if I do these numbers right. Yeah, 550 slugging since May 13th in 34 games, 322 on base, 550 slugging from a shortstop in 2022. That's superstar territory right there. I mean, to me, the player he most resembles in terms of his development arc over the last 20 years or so would probably be Manny Machado, who was the third pick overall out of high school. The big difference was Machado was very young for his draft class. He was 17 when he was drafted. Witt was basically 19 the week after. Like, Witt's about a year older. Machado played 219 games in the minor leagues. Of course, there wasn't a pandemic in there. So, I mean, even if you give Witt a little bit of credit for the 2020 season, the games played is about the same. Elite superstar players don't play a ton of games in the minor leagues because they're so good. They don't need to. They get to the major leagues before they have that opportunity. And Machado was, about 2 years younger than Witt was when he made it to the majors. But his first year, his rookie season, 51 games, he had a 98 OPS plus. His second season, he played almost every day, led the league with doubles, 51 doubles, still only a 102 OPS plus. He really started to break out as when he was the same age Witt is now. But that was the year he got hurt late in the year, which was fortunate for the Royals because they didn't face him in the ALCS that year in 2014. And then from 2015 on, he's basically been the superstar that you know. And I think Witt could have a similar trajectory. Machado came up as a shortstop. They moved him to third base. And that was one of the reasons why I liked the idea of Witt as a third baseman, because Machado was a absolutely phenomenal defensive third baseman for the first 7-8 years of his career. His defensive numbers are still good, but not as good as they were when he was young. But you know what? If Witt can be even an average defensive shortstop, he's going to be a 5-win player, I think. And that's the guy the Royals have to build around for the next 6 years.
All right, let's talk minor league minute. We got a few things we want to get to real quick here before we get out of here. The minor league minute, and then a couple of Royals from the past we want to know. Make a couple of notes about.
So the minor league minute this week, I have a player that is not on anybody's list. He's not on a top 30 prospect list. I don't know how much you know about him, but I'm all about performance. And, at some point, if a player performs, you have to take him seriously, at least acknowledge him, even if you're not sure what kind of prospect he is. And so I'm going to bring up a player by the name of Logan Porter. Are you familiar with Logan Porter?
Logan Porter is a
it's
catcher,
okay to say
I
no.
believe.
He is.
If I'm not mistaken.
He's a catcher, not drafted out of college, went to the famous baseball institution of Dixie State University. I believe before that he was at Northwestern Oklahoma State University.
Sure,
so you can. So this is a guy.
Baseball factories.
Yes, baseball factories, right up there with Vanderbilt. Alec Lewis actually did a nice article on him a few weeks ago about his road to being where he is today. This is a guy who's really nobody ever took him seriously as anything. Even in college, he had to fight for his opportunities, but he's just crushed the ball wherever he goes. The Royals signed him in 2018. He, again, not drafted, had to perform. Performed immediately in rookie ball. Came out the next year, hit 352 with a 481 OBP in the Appalachian League. Then the pandemic hit. Last year, went to high A ball, big jump, hit 241, but 368 on base, 451 slugging. This is the kind of take and rake hitter that the Royals just never have. A guy who, waits for his pitch, he gets it, he drives it as far as he can. If he doesn't, he'll take ball 4. But this year in Double-A, He moved up. He's 26. He's going to be 27 years old in a month. So this is a guy who's about as good as he's going to be right now. But he's hitting .331 with a .470 on base and a .535 slugging. You were talking about 800 OPS. Oh, that 800 is nothing. What about 1,000 OPS? This guy has 1,000 OPS in Double A.
There's a stat that you're breezing right by.
We talked about his age. You know about his age? I mentioned his age. He's going to be 27 in a month.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Yeah. He's like I said. This guy. He's not going to get any better than it is now. But there's a performance level where you look at a guy and just like, maybe he's not. He's too young, too old to improve. But can this player right now perform in the major leagues, at least offensively? Those numbers are so impressive that you have to start wondering, can this guy play in the major leagues? And as you mentioned, he's a catcher. And this is the same problem we talked about with Melendez for months, which is the idea of you can't catch. Are you moving to first base? Like, where do you play? If you're a shortstop who's not a great defender, you can move to second or third. If you're a center fielder, you can move to left or right. If you're a catcher, what do you do? He doesn't have a great defensive reputation, which is why the reason I bring him up today, specifically today, for the very first time in his career, he started at third base, which paradoxically actually makes me think the Royals are starting to take him seriously as a hitter, to the point where they're like, we got to figure out if this guy can play a position in the major leagues, somewhere else, because he can hit. And maybe this guy, I don't think this guy's ever going to be a star or even an everyday guy. But could this guy be a valuable bench bat? Yeah, I think so. And I just thought, on a day of positivity, on my Ted Lasso Father's Day, I just wanted to give a shout out to a guy who's nobody has ever given anything to, and is almost 27 years old, still in the minor leagues, but is by sheer performance forced people to at least acknowledge him and take him seriously as somebody who might one day be on a major league team.
But Cam Gallagher is catching in AAA, and Freddie Fermin, so you can't possibly move him up and find out, because they just will not move anybody. I have no problem with him being highlighted, because his on-base percentage the 4 years he's been with the Kansas City Royals, and he's been old for every age. I mean, he was 22 in rookie ball, 448. He was 23 in Burlington, 481 on base. He was 25 last year at high A, 368. This year he's 26, playing in Double-A, on base 470. I mean, let's go. Like,
he has a 946 career OPS. Like, again, is this for real? Maybe not. But at some point, I don't care what your prospect status is, what your draft status was. You hit at that level, you at least deserve the opportunity to get a chance to fail at the next level.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd like to see what he could do in AAA. But again, I think that, the fact that he's trying a new position is not because they can't move Freddie Fermin off of catcher. I think that they don't see this guy as a major league catcher defensively. But if he hits like this, it may not matter.
If he gets on base like that, on base like that, you got to be able to find a place. He's got value in a deal, right? Put him into a deal and go get something that you do need. Lorenzo Cain, released by the Milwaukee Brewers at exactly 10 years of service time. That was a nice gesture of the Brewers to make sure he gets his full pension when he goes. Anything you want to say about Lorenzo Cain, if indeed we've seen the last of him?
I just want to salute and acknowledge him for being, to me, he was the best player on the team that was the most important, most special team that I've ever had the privilege to root for. Eric Hosmer probably got a little bit more attention. Wade Davis maybe got a little more attention in that bullpen. Maybe was more important in the playoffs. But if you look at the development of the Royals from the 2011, 2012, seasons of disappointment to the 2013, okay, it's starting to come together, but are they really going to get there in time? To what happened in 2014, the plucky team that made it to the World Series, and then 2015 that was just took out everybody and was just a machine. That team development tracked what Lorenzo Cain did, from being in the minor leagues at the beginning of that to coming up and being promising, but having trouble staying healthy and constantly having leg injuries in 2012, 2013, to finally being able to stay on the the everyday roster in 2014 and showing incredible speed and defense, but not hitting for much pop. And then in 2015, adding some power and being a 7-win player, finishing third in the AL MVP vote, the only Royal in the last 37 years to finish in the top 5 or even I think top 8. And what he would, I think he still doesn't get enough credit in the postseason. When I think of what Eric Hosmer did in the playoffs for the Royals in those years, Eric Hosmer as a Royal in 2014 and 2015 had 34 hits and 29 RBIs. That's a ridiculous ratio. And Eric Hosmer, to his credit, did a lot better with runners in scoring position. In 2015, in particular, he hit like 100, literally 100 in the postseason when there was nobody in scoring position, and 600 with runners in scoring position. But after the 2015 season, when I went through and made a list, because I'm completely insane, of the 218 most important moments of the 2014 and 2015 Royals, and just watched video clip after video clip for like 3 weeks to put that together, one of the things that stood out was how incredible a base runner Lorenzo Cain was, and how many of Eric Hosmer's RBIs simply came because Lorenzo Cain was such an exceptional base runner. You think about his famous scoring from first base against the Blue Jays and Jose Bautista hitting the cutoff man. That was the second time in that postseason he scored from first base on a single. He also scored an incredibly important run in Game 5 of the ALDS against the Houston Astros from first base when Eric Hosmer singled and the center fielder Carlos Gomez slipped and fell down, and he scored without even drawing a throw. And he was in the middle of every rally. His defense was unbelievable. I mean, he broke the Baltimore Orioles' spirit in 2014, just making catch after catch, diving in center field, to the point where by the time the Royals had left Baltimore, I mean, Gerard Dyson said something to the effect of, I don't think this series is coming back to Baltimore, and I don't think the Orioles do too. And he got a lot of attention for that. But the idea was psychologically they were broken because the Royals defense was so exceptional, and that was Lorenzo Cain. He was the Royals at their best. Clutch hitting, unbelievable defense, smart base running. I want to salute what he did for this organization. He'll be in the Royals Hall of Fame in short order. And if this is it for him, what a career for a guy who, famously didn't play baseball until he was a junior in high school. A great scouting, great scouting find by the Royals to get him in that trade for Zach Greinke. And I just hope the Royals can make more moves like that. You talk about being transactional. That Lorenzo Cain's a good example of why you should do that. So,
and the other one that we want to note, send out condolences, our thoughts to the Wickersham family. Dave Wickersham passed away on Saturday morning. He was a member of the inaugural 1969 Royals, tossed 5 shutout innings, helping the Royals win the first game in club history on April 8th, 1969. I recorded the first save in Royals history on April 12th, 1969, right there at the Oakland Coliseum. As a matter of fact, that was one that was nice for the franchise to get it against the A's. First of 4 players to appear for both the Kansas City Athletics and the Kansas City Royals, and second of 2 pitchers to do that. And he also was a guy that was very vocal as a member of the Pittsburgh Pirates, saying we're going to observe. We're not going to play. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated, and he stood up, and he, as a representative white player, along with one of the black players on the Pirates team, and said, no, we're going to spend the time to observe what has happened here and remember and take notice of Martin Luther King Jr., a guy that was a leader and, an activist off the field, a great teammate, obviously right there and standing with the black teammates of which I think the Pirates and thanks to our friends Kurt Nelson from the Royals who gave me a lot of this information. It had 11 black players, and he knew it was important, and he stood up for it, and he played a large role for the Royals in getting the franchise off the ground in Kansas City. He passed away on Saturday, and we remember him here today as a guy that did more than just play baseball. He also stood up for the things that mattered and counted in life. So to the Wickersham family, we were thinking of you.
Yeah, and it's easy to say now that we all would have stood up like he did, but being on the right side of history is difficult. If it wasn't, everybody would do it. And that when Martin Luther King was assassinated, right, just I think the day before the baseball season was supposed to begin in 1968, it was not at all clear that the sentiment around the sport was that we were going to postpone games for that. And the Pirates famously had, I think, more African American players than any other organization. 3 years later, 1971, I think they became the first team ever to start a lineup that was entirely constructed of African American players. And obviously, they felt very strongly about that. But the fact that they put out a statement with the name of, and I can't remember which of the African American players' names was on that list, but co-signed by him and Dave Wickersham, who was a veteran, a respected veteran in the sport at that point, who'd been in the major leagues for 9 years. That alone, I think, cements him as one of the good guys. And like I said, an inaugural Royal, the Royals, we sometimes forget are a young franchise, but they're not so young anymore. And we're starting to lose that inaugural generation of guys. Obviously, Art Stewart passed away not too long ago. This is this 54th season this team's been around. We still have Denny Matthews with us, who's been there since the beginning. But some of those inaugural players are starting to pass away. He was 85 years old, lived a full life. When you think about how much success this team had as an organization early on, I think those guys should get extra attention because the Royals really were that model franchise for so long from the get-go. Yeah, and he was one of the guys who was responsible for that.
On Juneteenth, not a better way to end than remembering the Pittsburgh Pirates for what they did and leading the way. Because as Rany said, there were teams that didn't want to do that. And they led the way and made it very clear where they were going to go. And ultimately, baseball did shut down for it. I can't think of a better way to honor today with the memory of a guy, a white man and a black man that stood and a team that stood and said, no, this is the right thing to do. And ultimately, the sport realized it, as did many other sports at that time as well. So we remember Dave Wickersham here today. That's going to do it for us here on the Kauffman Corner for Dr. Rany Jazayerli. My name is Soren Petro. We will see you next time here in Kauffman Corner.